Hi there, and thanks so much for tuning back in. Today we are going to talk about a question or a series of questions, really from Matt. Um, I got his first email 2 days ago, and then there's a subsequent email with some more questions. So before we go into it, as always, nothing here is medical advice to anyone, but just general thoughts and comments that I hope will be helpful, specifically to you, Matt, but really anybody else as well that is hearing this. So let's get right to it. 2 days ago, again, I got this email. Here it is. I've suffered 2 instances of acute insomnia over the past 2 months after having little to no problem sleeping in my life. 1 month ago, upon contracting an upper respiratory virus, I found I had extreme insomnia, only sleeping a few hours a night for a week. I went to a doctor who prescribed me hydroxyzine, which helped me sleep a little. Once the sickness went away, a week and a half later, the insomnia resolved as well. A week ago, I once again caught a cold. Before the onset of the symptoms themselves, I once again had insomnia. This time, the insomnia was extreme. I went a few nights without sleeping and had continued difficulty even while taking the hydroxyzine. I went back to the doctor who checked my vitamin D levels, which were found to be very low, 20.5 nanograms per milliliter. My doctor's theory is that my vitamin D levels were so low that what little vitamin D I had was being used for immune system function, and there was not enough left over to facilitate sleep. I've started taking vitamin D supplements to see if this helps. I'm still struggling with insomnia at this time. In your experience, can a vitamin D deficiency cause this kind of acute insomnia? So let's stop reading there and address this question. So it's a common question whether a vitamin deficiency or kind of a hormonal imbalance or lack of serotonin levels or things like that can cause insomnia. And in my experience, that never happens. That's my honest opinion. Is that I've seen. I've did kind of math in my head. I've seen at least many hundred, more like maybe between 1,000 and 2,000 people with insomnia, and it's never been that they had an immune deficiency or a vitamin deficiency or lack of a hormone or something like that. And by the way, insomnia caused by a vitamin D deficiency, in my opinion, has never been described. Now, the doctor that you saw may have had a different thought process than what you understood or what I understand, and I always think that's super important. It sounds obviously like your doctor is really trying to help you. That's super important. But that said, insomnia often misunderstood, poorly understood, and deficiencies never really, in my opinion, cause them. It is the stress that causes them. And in your case, Matt, there seems to be stress. Like you have had these respiratory tract infections, and they caused you to sleep better and sleep worse, of course, and then you had trouble, and then it went away, but then you had trouble sleeping again, which is a very kind of typical pattern for a type of insomnia that's called psychophysiological insomnia. That there's, you have no problem sleeping, something happens. In your case, you had a cold that somehow triggers, the disease process itself can throw off your sleep pattern, and you have trouble sleeping, and then now you're apprehensive. Now you're thinking like, why did I not sleep well? What happened? Like, and then that, thinking about sleep, that definitely causes insomnia a lot of the time. So, okay, let's see. I think I addressed that first question. So let's continue reading here. I've heard you discuss the problem with pursuing a solution that ultimately won't resolve the problem, and how that can just lead to frustration with continued insomnia, like sleep hygiene. I am wondering if this vitamin D issue is that sort of thing, or if there's some credence to it. I like to stop taking the hydroxyzine, but the lack of sleep is so disruptive to my life, I'm having difficulty to do so. So I think you're, I completely agree with this, Matt. I think vitamin D is kind of one of those distractors that is not the root cause, and like pursuing it often just leads to confusion. So I told this to Matt in an email, and I basically told him that, I think, as I always say, the best thing to do when you have insomnia is kind of restrict your time in bed and spend a little less time in bed. And then Matt came back. Where is that? Let's see. He came back with another email that is here. Um, he wrote to me that he started sleep restriction, and this was like literally like a day later. He said, "One night of sleep restriction, and I'm already feeling hopeful. Slept a solid 5.5 hours last night with just a small dose, 25 milligrams of hydroxyzine. If I get another solid night of sleep under my belt, I'll try without the hydroxyzine. Look forward to the next video or podcast." And I wrote back to him that I was very, very encouraged by that, but also cautious after sometimes being very optimistic. I told him, like, that's great. I'm very, very happy that he's noticing improvement that soon. That's a very good sign. But you often have setbacks in the first few weeks. So I told him that he shouldn't be alarmed if he falls back into having more insomnia early on. So Matt got back to me and said the following: "Thank you. I look forward to the next video. One thing I was hoping you might address based on last night's experience for me." So he's writing, "I fell asleep almost as soon as I went to bed, but woke up an hour later and couldn't fall back to sleep. Does this mean I'm not restricting my sleep enough and I should go to, restrict his bedtime more? I should go to bed an hour later," he says. "I should go to bed an hour later." And this is a good question, because what often happens is that when somebody starts doing bedtime restriction, and by the way, if you're completely new and you have no clue what I'm talking about here, bedtime restriction is like a key cognitive behavioral therapy technique for insomnia. And how the way it works is that you purposely go to bed typically later than you normally would, so you stay up later, and you also spend less time in bed than you normally would, and you get up at the same time every morning, no matter what happens. So you're spending less time in bed, allowing your sleep drive, your need to sleep, to build, so that you have a strong sleep drive, so it overcomes, your insomnia, and you sleep well, like solid, for at least 5-6 hours initially, and then once you sleep better and better, you can extend time in bed, spend more time in bed. So that's kind of how it works. So what happened in Matt's case was that I believe this must be like night number 2. Like the first night he's actually slept pretty well, and then night number 2 he fell asleep quickly, but then woke up an hour later and couldn't fall back asleep, and is wondering, kind of like, am I doing something wrong? And I think this is really important, man. This is super important. I'm really happy you answered this. You asked me this question, because this is so often exactly what happens. Like, you start restricting time in bed, and you kind of expect that to lead you to sleeping better, which it does over time. But when you have insomnia, what happens is that your circadian rhythm, kind of the internal clock that determines like when you're supposed to sleep, etc., is a little bit off. And then you also have this baseline kind of anxiety about sleep. You're a little bit apprehensive. You're thinking about sleep. So those two things puts you in a position where the first 1 to 2 weeks of bedtime restriction, or sleep restriction, as it's also called, often is rocky. It's often rocky. Things like this often happen, like you fall asleep quickly, but then you wake up and then you can't fall back to sleep, or you just have a hard time falling asleep from the beginning, or you have very superficial, very choppy sleep. And basically the core, the main thing I want to drive home here today is, don't worry. The first week, the first 2 weeks often are very rocky. You sleep, maybe fall asleep better, but you still wake up, or you have very fragmented sleep, or things like that. Nothing unusual, okay? Nothing unusual at all. But going back to your specific situation here, Matt, there's one specific thing I want to point out was the following. Like, if you fall asleep quickly, but then you wake up an hour later and you can't fall back asleep, well, the important thing is that even if this happened, you should still get up the wake up time you've decided. So let's say you decided that you're going to go to bed not before midnight, and you were going to get up at 6. Then if you fall asleep at midnight, you sleep till 1 a.m., then you're up from 1 a.m. to, let's say, 4 a.m., you still have to get up at 6. You still have to get up at 6. And this is what makes the first couple of weeks of bedtime restriction or sleep restriction so hard. But that's also what makes it effective, because if you sleep really poorly, let's say one night, you still get up, you still stay up the following day, then the next night you have a much higher chance of like getting into that pattern that we are aiming for. So I hope this was helpful to you, Matt, or anybody else that is tuning in. And of course, if you have any follow-up questions, please let me know. And anyone else as well, any questions are always super welcome. So do send me an email, daniel@insomniainsight.co, or leave a comment, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, that was it for today. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.